Welcome to Collaboratory. How many people, this is your first time joining us at Collaboratory? Well, I like it that all of you out-of-towners are the only ones, so welcome back and thank you for being here. On behalf of the team at Collaboratory, we love that we're an incubation innovation hub that's core is a community foundation, donating money to support causes that are important to us while simultaneously on an 18-year deadline solving for all social issues in the region through collaboration. And tonight we are here to be inspired by a conversation, and I truly appreciate you coming to town. With that being said, we have some board of directors for Collaboratory that are here today. Ms. Gail Markham is our board chairwoman and all things extraordinary. Julie Ben-Susan is somewhere in the house. She's been giving tours all afternoon. Julie, thank you for your leadership. Are there any other board members that I have not yet said hello to? Okay, want to make sure. So my role here this evening was to introduce Collaboratory and our CEO of Collaboratory, Ms. Dawn Bellamarsh. As many of you know, especially if you follow Dawn on LinkedIn, she's a huge fan of innovation. She's a huge fan of authenticity, and she's a huge fan of leadership. She actually has her PhD in leadership. I didn't know you could get one. I thought that was pretty cool. Dawn, like many of us in community right now, had a health emergency and is not feeling it. And we begged her, actually we tied her up and said she wasn't allowed to come. And as you can imagine, she's devastated because this is her favorite topic. And she did a lot of pre-work getting to know these guys. Here's the good news. I know them better. So with no further ado, I am Kristen Collins, your moderator for this evening. And thank you, Frank. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you and through our panelists. And many of you are here because you're aware of one or all of our panelists. You did the pre-read. Their full bios are in our program. We're going to take a different lens as to why they were selected to be in this Edison Lightbulb panel. Glen is internationally renowned, understanding how we can take systemness and personalize our experience within the system. That is possibly one of the most challenging topics I could come up with. I was in corporate America for a long time. We need systems. But do we lose our individuality and our personalization? And I see some heads nodding, and I won't call you out. So I love that. And by the time we leave here today, you're going to be inspired to better understand how we can get back to personalization within the context of how we show up in environment. Sound good? Excellent. Our second panelist is my friend Navy Bob. And as you might know from his bio, ironically, he carried the nuclear codes for our submarines under the Bush administration. So that's probably the coolest thing I've ever heard. And Bob had me at that. He exited the military and joined healthcare, which was pretty exciting, and was with Advent Health leading with a team over there, only to discover that there's a big piece of leadership missing, and how can we be innovative and lead with love? My favorite topic. So, Navy Bob, we're happy to have you here, and thank you for being here. Our third panelist traveled the furthest distance, and I was blessed to be with my husband at a gathering in Detroit, Michigan for my husband's work. And I got up early one morning to hear the speaker, and I was not happy about it. And within 5 minutes of Khali presenting, I realized why I was in Detroit that day. Talk about innovation and how to lead from a different angle. We're going to spend some time with Khali today, and he can share with you his journey towards leadership. That is extremely innovative, and I'm extremely humbled to have you here, Khali. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So you guys ready to go? Let's do it. Oh, I like that. Thank you. Navy Bob, not to put you on the spot, but I'm going to. I'd like to start with you, if you would share with folks your connection to innovation and needing to lead differently because of innovation. Would you share with us an example from your arsenal of stories that you have on when you first started connecting with leading differently so you could be innovative?
So thank you so much. It's such an honor and privilege to be here. Just wonderful. So thank you so much, Christine. And thank you, Collaboratory, for hosting this wonderful event. So I wrote a book. It took me about 5 years to write. I put my blood, sweat, and tears in this book. And I went back and I started to reflect on good and bad leadership. And during that time period that I looked at outcomes that were just surpassing all expectations. And I started to put the dots together. And there's no other way to explain it other than leading with love. So I went even back to my childhood and where I learned this. So I went back when my father was 3 years old. I saw a picture. He's hugging a dog. And 2 days later, after that picture was taken, his mother died giving childbirth to his sister. And his sister died as well. And my father, because my father couldn't take care of him, was put in an orphanage. And so he lost his entire family and was put in an orphanage for 8 years. So when he had a family of his own, he said, you know, it was the most important thing. And that's where I learned leading with love, agape. And I thought that was just the family, that this only existed in family. And when I was about to go to my second submarine, I get the tap on my shoulder to say that my father died by suicide. Highly depressed, stigma, and it was just the worst day of my life. And I was about to go to my second submarine, which we deployed for 6 months. And I said, there's no way I can continue in the Navy. But I heard about this gentleman. His name was Bruce Grooms, who was the captain. And I heard about how much he cared for people. And I was assigned to his submarine. And so after serving underneath him, that's where I learned that it is not just unique to a family. You can lead with love in a organization or a workplace. And I felt the same magic as my father felt for me. And that's why I learned leading with love. And later on, I'll talk about the incredible ramifications of leading with love. I talk about how I thought I was counter-detected by an adversary submarine behind their enemy lines. And it was my executive officer who spoke up. So that was the journey of leading with love. And if you look at the literature, there's very little to nothing in the literature, in the workplace, talking about leading with love. And yet, there are no downsides. You'll become a legendary leader. You will build a legendary culture, and you will lead a wonderful life. I have yet to found any downsides with leading with love.
Thank you for that. What do you guys think? Glenn, I'd love you to piggyback on that. And when, you know, one of your aha moments for leadership through innovation.
Well, I'd like to just play off of leading with love. You know, I know that we hear these types of terms nowadays. It's not by accident. When you are standardized to do with a certain thing for so long, you begin to lose touch with the changing world around you. But what you mostly do is you lose touch with yourself. Let me go back. You reminded me of my father, Bob. See, when I was a kid, I'll go back when I was 12 years old. So my mother and father, Cuban immigrants, they had to start their lives all over again. My dad looked at me when I was 12 years old, and he said, and he started early because I didn't quite get it. In fact, it took me until I was about 20 years old to understand. He said, son, this is the greatest country in the world. The greatest country in the world. But its capitalistic system will create something that's called envy. We'll become a country that compares itself with one another to the point where money will define us, not who we are. If you think now, 56 years later, or 46 years later, how right he was. I mean, let's think about this. People value more of what you have, not who you are. And I actually believe, and this is what's helped me learn to lead with innovation, is that we don't know each other anymore. I mean, if I were to ask two of you who've known each other for 5 or more years, and I said, what do you know about each other? Surface level discussion. See, this is what standardization does. It keeps us on the surface. It doesn't allow us to go deep. Why? Because if I went deep, then someone might judge us. And that happened. So we're afraid to tell people what we really think, who we really are, what really matters to us. So I've learned that we're now living in this age of personalization, where it's no longer about the institution defining the individual. It's about the individual defining the process towards a shared mission with the institution. Which means what? Well, let me take you back when you started going to school. You had to get the right grades. Oh, I have to get into college, but I can't do that unless I qualify. And then I go to college hoping that I can get a good job. And then when I go into the workplace, what happens? Or maybe I'll share my story and it might to reflect it upon your own. Glenn, if you do these 10 things, you'll drive these 20 outcomes. And those 10 things, you got to do them our way. And I'm the kind of person who likes to ask a lot of questions. What happened? 6 months into my job, they said, hey, Glenn, you're too passionate. You need to tone it down. Now I was living with my father and mother at the time. And my dad said, you're going to double down on your passion. I go, Dad, I'm going to get fired. He goes, no. He goes, son, you see, that's what happens when someone's threatened by you. They tell you what you shouldn't do. See, what they don't know is that, see, I've known you since birth. And being passionate is what you're all about. So double down, get in the numbers, because that's all they really care about. And you'll see, they'll never ask you to tone down your passion again. Why is it so important? That single experience in my career led me to where I'm at today. Because, see, I realized that most people wouldn't have listened to their father or mother. Because, see, they don't understand, apparently. No, do what they tell you to do. Get caught in what I call the career quicksand. And you can see why today, if we don't lead based upon what matters to people and how that aligns with institution and organizational needs, we will forever be a society that is defined by what you do inside the box you're given. And what do we know? That this has become an incredible limitation to humanity. In fact, an incredible limitation to innovation. Because innovation is based on what? The foundations of diversity of thought. So if you don't know who people are, and you fit inside the box you're given, do you see how this takes us to a point of being at -70? What does that mean? And I'll end with this. If the baseline for innovation is 0, I actually believe that we're at -70. Why? Because we create this illusion of progress at the expense of real evolution. Because baseline means that you are at a point to influence. And you have high trust because you know yourself. You know what your self-worth is, and you know how to best contribute. Ask yourself that question.
That is an actually delicious segue. You can't make this stuff up. To our third panelist, Khali. I know a bit of your story, and some here tonight with us know some of your story too. Your story to leadership is extremely innovative. Possibly one of the most innovative stories I've ever heard. It's also a very unique path. Will you share with us your opening to leadership and how it shifted for you from one style of leadership or one way of being to a different way of being?
Yeah, I can share that with you guys. So first of all, thank you for having me here today. And I'm gonna keep it short and simple for you guys. So I would love to say that I had these great stories of parents and all that type of stuff. My mother and father gave me away when I was little. They were hooked on heroin and whatever drugs of their choice at that time. So they gave me to a lady in my community who watched all the kids. She was babysitting the kids, and so she got me, and they just never came back to get me. And so I was raised in a house where I wasn't related to anybody. My first day at school was the lady who raised me, her son, walking with me down the railroad tracks, and he took his gun out and started shooting at me. And I'm screaming and crying, and I'm chasing him. He's telling me to get away from him, and I'm screaming, and he's chasing, and so I'm just running. And long story short, I have a good sense of direction, and I saw the school, and I went to once I saw the school, I really didn't need him no more. So I went to the school. That was my introduction to school. But the point to that was, like, I found out early on in the 3rd grade that I couldn't read or write. I knew it in the 3rd grade that I couldn't read or write at all. But the teachers hadn't figured it out. My teachers, in fact, used to send me to the liquor store to pick up their package of liquor and cigarettes. I'll never forget it. They used to send me to get their gin and a pack of Winston 100 cigarettes or whatever it was. and I would just go to the store, So they never asked a critical question, why was I, acting out and stuff like that. But I had a tough upbringing when it came to school. But they just would pass me on and on to the next grade and to the next grade and to the next grade. And so I got a chance to see what bad leadership looked like. I got a chance to see what bad leadership. So those guys, instead of those guys being leaders and helping me and removing barriers or showing me how to go down the right track, they literally sent me to the store to get their liquor and their cigarettes. And then in return, they would just pass me to the next grade. And so this type of stuff continued until I was in the 12th grade. And I got a report card that had A's and B's on it. And I'm like, man, this is a setup for failure. And the whole time, I'll never forget it. They used to always tell me, you're going to be dead or in jail before you're 21. You're going to be dead. Could you imagine being in the 3rd grade and somebody tell you you're going to be dead or in jail before you're 21? Constantly. You're not going to be able to be a garbage man or work at McDonald's. So I'm like, man, what's the alternative to this? In the 3rd grade, I'm thinking about this type of stuff and I'm seeing it. So if you pass a book to me in school, as soon as you pass a book to me in school, I just jump up and slap somebody or I crack a joke and they'll just kick me out and send me home just like clockwork. I knew what they would do, but then when I would go home, I would see everybody that was really out there in the streets hustling and doing whatever they was doing. And so I was learning by visual what was going on, and I actually started seeing people dying. So then I stopped dreaming. I stopped dreaming about a future. I stopped thinking about a future because all I could think about is what it's going to be like when I get shot. I wonder what it's going to be like when I die. Are people going to remember me? Are they going to miss me? Wonder what it's going to be like when I go to jail. So I started doing push-ups young, figuring out when I go to prison, I'm going to be ready. So I stopped dreaming about a future. I just started living a narrative that was given to me by the quote-unquote leaders of that time. So my journey to leadership was one day after I dropped out of school and hit the streets in the city of Detroit, and I started tearing the city of streets apart because I didn't care. I was the most dangerous person in the streets because I didn't think about living. I didn't care about dying. I didn't care about federal indictments. I didn't care about none of that. It meant nothing to me because I was already seeing, that's what my expectation was to die or be in jail. And so when I started seeing young people dying on a base, I'm like, well, it's just a matter of time before I'm next. So I became more reckless. I started doing the most reckless stuff until one day somebody pulled me to the side and said, you do understand that the rest of the world don't live like this, right? You do understand that. And I got 30 guys around me that'll do anything that I say right now in the moment. And I'm still operating off this narrative that was given to me that I'm gonna be dead or in jail. I'm living off bad leadership. I'm watching how bad leaders create narratives. So I said, man, get away from my house. Go back to the west side where you from with that, man. Go back to your neighborhood. And so he took me to his house one day. He said, man, help me move this thing, this counter. So he touching the counter, I'm touching the counter. I'm saying, pick the stuff up, man. What are you doing? Come on, move it. So he's like, look at the picture in front of you. I'm like, what? He said, look at the picture in front of you. I look at the picture. He said, these are your friends. They are all dead or in jail for real, bro. What do you want to do with your life? I'm like, man, what? He's like, look, this guy, Michigan Most Wanted, Detroit's Most Wanted. This guy's on America's Most Wanted. All these guys are dead in jail, bro. Don't be the next guy on this picture. What you want to do with your life? I'm like, are you going to move this thing or not? He said, get out of my house, man. So I left, but when I got home, he put something on my mind that I hadn't thought about. Nobody had asked me that question before. What it is that you want to do with your life? And once I got home, I started thinking about it. I'm like, man, the guy down the street just got killed. The little girl right there, she just killed somebody in the backyard, so she about to go to jail. She fighting the case right now. I'm like, man, what do I want to do with my life? And I said, I want to learn how to read because that's the only thing that struck fear in my heart. I wasn't scared of nothing else in the world, but you put a book in front of me as a grown man, I would shiver. And so I said, man, you know what? I left the streets. I left everything. I said, man, anybody owe me money in the streets, anybody that's gang banging, whatever you want, I'm gone. And I went and paid $40 to get a GED. And I went there to the GED place, and the guy, after about a couple days in there, he said, man, can I talk to you outside, brother? I said, for what? I'm thinking what did I do or something? He's like, can I talk to you outside? I said, what's up? He said, you can't get a GED. I'm like, what? Man, I just paid my $40 like everybody else. He said, what you mean I can't get a GED? He said, because you can't read or write at all. He said, but you're highly intelligent. First time somebody ever said that to me. He said, let me take you down here to this other classroom, and why don't you try to get your high school diploma? And let's just do it the right way. Start from the kindergarten and work your way up. And so I went down there with him because I had to put my pride aside. I said, if I gave 100% to the streets, to a narrative that somebody created for me, I'll give 100% as something I want to do for myself, a new narrative. And I went down there and I did what I had to do. And then I started thinking from there, man, every day I'm seeing these young kids going down the same path I was going down. I said, man, have anybody ever asked them the critical question? Do they know that this is not how the world should be? Have anybody asked them the question, what's really going on with them? What's the real thing? Instead of labeling them, I always say that I don't see bad kids, I see kids who haven't been heard yet. Because I didn't have the words to say that I needed help in reading. I didn't have the courage. I didn't have the, you know what I'm saying? I didn't know how to advocate for myself. And so I started thinking about that. I got a job and I was doing everything I was supposed to do. And I was like, man, I would really be more happy if I was helping young people in my neighborhood. And I started doing that. And that's what led me to the path that I'm on right now today.
Question.
What's the question?
I'm going to make an observation. Yeah, that's great. Great. That's great. Let's get this thing moving.
Let's get it moving.
You ready now, Glenn?
So no, Khali, I love your story. But what did I get out of this? And I want everybody to think about what they got out of it. You basically were part of an environment whose narrative was predefined, and you followed the status quo until you realized that there were opportunities that nobody else told you about, until finally they made you realize that the path you were down was leading you to either jail or death. But what did you do? Throughout this whole time, you created a community of people to the point when these people always saw you beyond how you saw yourself, until you realized that, wait a second, I'm actually capable of something. Is that about right? At least that's what I heard.
Hey, that's what you heard.
But what I'm getting at is,
You got to
Go ahead.
make it simple and plain for me. Let's go with it.
no, but you know where I'm going is that, how many times have you been in an environment where you know that it's not right, but you still keep doing it?
Well, it's ironic you ask that rhetorical question, because it was a very juicy conversation I was having last evening. How do you show up in an environment that operates in a certain way? And how do you find the courage to go within yourself to understand how you actually feel? And then how do you show up in that environment from that place of authenticity? So I'd like that to be our next question. Okay, we can't change the environments for the most part around us, right? There's lots of stuff going on. Everybody's different, and yet we have to figure out how to be in environment, or we could go climb a mountain and go hibernate for the rest of our lives. What are some tips or tools that you have used to be able to show up in an environment? And Khali, you basically just described that for us, where you changed your mindset within your environment. You didn't get picked up and brought to go live with someone else. So why don't you start with that and take us through the process of you getting your GED and then you creating the beautiful movement that you have in Detroit?
So for me, I had to look at my past to see where I was going. I needed a true assessment of where I was at, and I used my past as fuel to push me forward. I've seen the worst in people. I've seen the worst in humanity. I've seen some of the worst things you'll probably ever want to see in your life. And I've been around it and exposed to it. So now when I look at the challenges of going back to school and reading or writing or holding down a job, it's not as bad. You know what I mean? It's like, man, you mean this is all I have to do to live a legitimate lifestyle? This is all I have to do? See, because being in the streets is hard. See, I don't know if you know it or not, but being in the streets is hard. I tell guys all the time, I say, man, when you're in the streets, here's how it goes. Here's how it plays out. When the feds come get you, they come take your money, they might take your freedom. But when your neighbors come get you, they taking your life, because they don't want to run into you at the gas station. They don't want to run into you while they out at the club flexing your Rolex or flexing your jewelry. They don't want to bump back into you. They don't want to have these problems. So when they come get it, they take your life. So if you can operate in that, operating a job is not that big a problem. Not for me. I'm like, man, this is easy. You mean nobody's going to come? I don't have to watch my back? So I got a job, and I was like, man, hey, I'm finna give 100%. They're like, you a company man. No, I'm looking at this job as an internship. I'm not just working here. I'm working here for a purpose and a reason. I want to be the CEO of this building one day. And if I have a business of my own, I want to see how many units it take to run this thing. How many hours do it actually take? So when I'm at a job and you say this job take 8 hours and I finish it in 4, and they say, man, Khali, we got to give you more work. No, I'm looking at how the business run and what it takes to make this business run. So now when I became who I am today, which is now a person who went from just doing it myself and ended up homeless, I ended up homeless living in my car to chase this dream of giving back to my community and to move the needle forward in our community. I ended up living in my car, went from 218 solid muscle down to 130 pounds. And people used to look at me in the neighborhood and say, I remember this guy used to walk from point A to point B. He used to sleep in his car. He used to be on the streets. But now I went from just being me to now I have 60 employees that work for me. I went from having zero money to a $7 million budget a year to run my organization. I provide for our community at no cost. Transportation, food, everything you could think of, we remove barriers for kids in our community. We got a 100% graduation rate, and kids are going to the best colleges in the country. But it took dedication. It took a whole lot of dedication, and that's what sent me on my way to doing that.
And you're such an inspiration because you are a natural leader, and you led on the streets, and everybody followed you on the streets. And then in that environment, you changed your mind.
Well, so let's be clear on something. And Jessica, she would not let me be happy today if I don't say this. So I do have to add this to this. So one of the things that I did when I was in the gang, and I was a gang leader at the time, I became the leader of the gang that's in our community. One of the things that I did was the first thing to do, let's stop all the violence. Let's go talk to these guys. They're not really our ops. The key word to op is opposite. We go to the same churches, we go to the same schools, we go to the same places, we look alike. Everything we do is pretty much the same. These guys are really not that much opposite from us. Let's go talk to these guys. Somebody somewhere is dating somebody or knows somebody. Let's get these guys to sit down and talk. So one of the guys who work for us now, and the reason that he works for us now, he said, because I always felt safe when Khali was around. I knew that I can go to the basketball court. So everything about what I'm saying is not doom and gloom as far as me from being that guy as a leader in the streets. I also made a peace treaty with a lot of different guys in our community, and we had that peace treaty for a long time until somebody made a mistake and then it fell apart. But things happen. Things happen. But for a few years, it was real peaceful in the community.
Well, I'm glad you brought that into conversation. Jessica, thank you for making sure he does. And folks, Peter and Jessica are also here with Khali, and thank you guys for making the trip from Detroit. We appreciate you. Navy Bob, I know some of your fantastic stories about showing up in an environment and leading and choosing to do it differently than what protocol or the typical situation or many other people would think is the way to do it. Can you share one example of that leadership style?
Absolutely. And so it's just heart-wrenching stories. So thank you so much. And, I'm starting to put the threads in. So it was somebody with love that changed your mind. If that person didn't love you and really showed you what the way was, you wouldn't be here today. And the same thing with innovation. I love how you talked about getting to know people. So the next story I'm going to share with you is my time when I was a commanding officer of the USS Texas. It was the second Virginia $2 billion nuclear submarine. And so when people think about doing things differently, if you think of the military, it's do as you're told, don't ask questions, and never challenge superiors, right? That's the military. Like, how dare you challenge me? And so I knew that something had to change. And I learned it from, like I told you, from my father and my second commanding officer. And so I want to take you on this journey. Does it work? People think that leading with love is a sign of weakness. In fact, it's the greatest strength you could possibly have. It's not a sign of giving people a break. It's not being soft. It's being accountable, because if you don't hold people accountable, then you're not leading with love. And so I wanted to take you on this. I took command of the USS Texas in 2009 in Groton, Connecticut. And our first task to take this $2 billion nuclear submarine in 2 months underneath the North Pole to certify it for Arctic operations. Never been done before. And because it was a new engineering plant, we were going to take this ship, do a home port shift over to Pearl Harbor, go underneath the North Pole, go through the Bering Strait, and go out the other side. And so let me tell you some of the dangers associated with that. When you go underneath the North Pole, it's 28-degree water because the salinity is so high. All of the condensation in the air comes out. It's like a rainforest in the engine room. And that condensation's falling on these highly energized panels that have microprocessors that are controlling the nuclear reactor. New processors, never been tested before in Arctic conditions. And there were days, 2 or 3 days, when the ice was so thick that you couldn't surface. And you can't use your emergency diesel generator for supplemental power. And if you lose the reactor and you can't surface, you know what happens? You die. You can't. I mean, you stop having electrical power, you run out of oxygen, you start producing carbon dioxide, you can't remove it, you die, just like the Kursk. Then they said, hey, there's 2 adversary submarines ready to come out. They never tracked a Virginia-class submarine before. So they're getting ready to get underway, and so be prepared. And so we're gonna take you through the Denmark Strait. The Denmark Strait is known as the iceberg capital of the world. The same iceberg that sank the Titanic, we were going in this narrow strait. And I said, how do you detect icebergs? It was a rhetorical question. They're 1,000 feet deep. He says, well, Captain, you got to go active sonar. I said, what about these adversary submarines? And he says, oh, great point. And they're like, you got to be kidding me. But I wasn't concerned about the icebergs, the adversary submarines, or the icebergs, or the ice. I was concerned about the culture of the crew. Have you ever heard of the game Whack-A-Mole? I've never experienced this bad on a nuclear reactor or a nuclear plant or a nuclear ship. It was an if, it was when and where we'd have multiple issues that are happening on board my submarine. And so I could have done the typical way of the Navy, start holding people accountable, punishing them for making these mistakes. But that's not what love is. I looked myself in the mirror and I said, what am I doing as the commanding officer? What culture am I setting? What barriers am I not fixing? And what resources am I not giving this crew? So I looked in the mirror, I started leading with love. And what I did, something so simple and yet so profound, I went on the computer and I put name at the top, put a line, and put 1, 2, 3. And I went up to topside, mustered the entire crew, and I said, crew, I love you, I care for you. I need to know what your top 3 concerns are. I go, I don't care what they are, just tell me. And I went down to the stateroom. About an hour later, I get a stack of problems like this. I got a pit in my stomach. And one of many was there wasn't sufficient number of computers on board the submarine. And this is a Virginia class. Everything works off, it's something out of a Star Trek movie. Everything operates off a computer. And what that entailed, it was about 2 hours extra of time that the crew needed to spend on board every day that they couldn't be with their families. The light bulb went off. No wonder why the crew didn't care for the ship. It's because the ship didn't care for them. So I immediately got new computers. That day, I mustered the crew back topside and I said, men, the first thing I said to them, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I love you. I care for you. I had no idea you didn't have computers. This will never happen again. I got new computers. And that was a spark. That was a spark that changed our culture. We went from the worst performing ship. We were ranked 10 out of 10 submarines in the squadron. And we became number 1 2 years later. We had the highest retention, lowest turnover in the Pacific Fleet for 2 consecutive years in a row. And we scored the highest score possible on this rigorous engineering exam. And about 3 months later, the culture changed of leading with love. That the crew was no longer fearful of making a mistake to get in trouble. They were fearful of making a mistake because they didn't want to let down their fellow shipmates and fellow crew members. And when that occurred, you no longer had apathetic where blinders were on. They started watching other people. And like the movie Back to the Future, 88 miles an hour, our outcomes exceeded all expectations. And I wasn't anything special. All I did was lead with love. And one of the biggest litmus tests, I continued this crew top 3. You could do this today in any organization. Every month, and the stack went from this to this to this to this, and there was one problem at the end. One. There was one issue that the crew had when I was about to leave command. And you know what that was? There wasn't sufficient variety of hot sauces on the cafeteria. If you're looking at something to do different, leading with love. Mr. Rogers inspires me. He went to my college. He says this famous quote. He says, love and success, always in that order. It's that simple and yet that difficult. And that's exactly what I did. I put love first, success will follow. And what you said, this generation or this corporate mindset is we got to do whatever we got to do to make sure we're successful. And it never works. If you put love first, success will far exceed expectations. And so I love the connection of leading with love. Someone gave you a chance, and that's exactly what I did with my crew. And going back to the innovation, we need to get to know our people and really start caring and making sure they're valued if we really want to see outcomes. And this is the innovative way.
Thank you, Navy Boss.
Great, good job.
So Glenn, I know that you wrote like a 14-part article for Forbes magazine about this topic. I know that we could do a masterclass for 2 years with you on this topic. So I want you to give us a takeaway for how we can show up from that place of love and environment that is toxic or unhealthy or not optimal. How do we show up and be true to ourselves?
Big question.
It is, and that's why I preluded it with, I know you could give me a big answer. But I want everybody to leave here today with a takeaway on how do I show up in this craziness?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's really awesome to be with both of you. But I hope that we've noticed one thing. We're talking about the exact same thing. Environment, individual, or both. Like, where do you start? With the environment, the individual? Where do you think we start? Where's Jesse? Jesse, where are you? Where do we start? Environment, individual, or both?
Yes.
Ooh.
Jessica, where do we start? Individual. You know what? I used to think that. Until what happened? And why did I think that way? Because we think that if we're in order, we just go back into the environment. But you know what the environment does? Boom! You hit a wall to the environment. In fact, I'm going to share something I didn't plan on discussing. To give you a case in point. So I'm proud to be Cuban American. Very proud of it. My parents are awesome. They're my heroes. In fact, when I was born, my dad was 50 years old. He lasted until he was 97.
Wow.
Yeah, it's awesome. I don't know if there's any Miller Lite fans out there, but my dad was one of the 3 chemists who formulated Miller Lite. You couldn't imagine how my high school years were. It was epic. But where am I going with all this? I remember when I was in corporate America and then said, and people kept saying, hey, if you understand my culture, you will know who I am as an individual, my cultural background. You know, in my culture, you'll know who I am as an individual. And I used to believe that. I don't believe that anymore. Why? Let me ask you this. If you're asked, what is more inclusive? That if you don't know my culture, you won't know me as an individual? Or, oh, by the way, these are the things that give me distinction. One of them just happens to be my cultural background. In fact, it was my cultural background and everything associated with that has given me a distinction of how I actually do things. Which one is more inclusive, A or B? Pardon me? Who said B? B. We reward A. We reward A. Why? Because of what you said. That's the narrative. We get caught up in narratives. So if we think that we go to work and we have to do exactly what the institution says, the narrative is, unless you follow the status quo, you won't succeed. But what we're really doing is we're saying, hey, if that's what the culture is, well, that's what's going to define me as an individual. See how I turned that around? See how I did that? So my point is that, see, we make the assumption that the environment will bring me the best that I can be. And by the way, you first start your career, that makes sense. But what happens over a period of time? You realize that we all signed up to listen to sameness. So we're just going to assimilate to the point where we lose our identity in the process. And I can tell you unequivocally, I've studied this. You could talk to me after if you disagree, and it's cool because that's one thing I always tell people. You don't have to agree with anything I say. Difference is I've rolled up my sleeve to understand these things. See, what I didn't tell you about my dad in Leading with Love is that he instilled a belief in me because he knew I was different. And when I believed that myself, that's when I realized I can shape environments. But I know I'm fortunate to have a father like that. And this is what you did with your crew. You made them believe. But that takes time. And this is why I think that we've reached a point where we have to be logical in recognizing that the environment is shaped by people, but the environment is also shaped by those leaders who only know what they know. That doesn't mean that they're bad. I've become very empathetic to people who have had this job for 20, 30 years. But I still hold them accountable to open their minds to new ways of thinking. But when you're told that, oh, that's just the way we've always done things, and because you have 25, 30-year tenure, it's as if we give them a free pass to say, okay, when what we're actually doing is doing a disservice to the organization. Because what the organization wasn't designed for was difference. Because think about this logically. Create efficiency. With efficiency, we can start predicting outcomes. And if everybody does things a certain way, following that playbook, we'll get to that outcome. What changed? Populations changed. Generations changed. We started thinking differently, and we no longer automatically bought what the institution was selling. And I say that very respectfully. But what I learned is that people aren't buying it, not because they don't agree, it's because they don't align their beliefs with how the institution is operating. So what does this require? It requires a form of leadership that recognizes that our differences is what's going to take us to eventually where we want to go. But that means that we need to know people at an intimate level. Frank, what gives you distinction as a leader?
Purpose and my willingness to want the world to be a better place.
And that was clear when you were here. What is my point? You won't assimilate to anything. Because if you veered away from who you are, you'd be unwell.
He'd be miserable, wouldn't he?
True? Okay, now I'm not going to go around the room, but I've been able to prove. By the way, not many people can answer that question.
But I have a question for you.
Go.
I have a question for you. Here's my question, right? So while you're leading, you still have to have a focus point. So for me, when I talk to our staff, I talk about heliocentrism and I talk about geocentrism. Heliocentrism is the true fact that the Earth and the planets move around the sun and the gravity of the sun keeps everything in order. Geocentrism is this fake belief that everything goes around you. And so we have heliocentrism people, and we have geocentrism people who think it goes around them, and they become disruptive to the movement. But for us, our movement is the young people in our community, so we stay focused on the mission, which is at our center. And I tell the staff that I work with, I tell them all, at any point in time, any one of you guys can be the CEO of this company. When I walk in a room, if you tell me to clean that paper up off the floor, I know you're telling me for a reason. It's not malicious. I'm over there cleaning that paper up off the floor. If you say, hey, when I came in, I saw some grass that would be a trip hazard out there, I'm out there with a spoon, whatever I got to do to get this grass out this crack, because we keep the mission first, which is moving the needle forward in our community. So my question is, we have to have some sort of order to cause disruption.
Yes, but what is order? Order is when we find the right harmony between established standards and what matters to the individual. That's why it works for you. Did anybody ever tell you that? Because see, here's the point.
I told me that.
No, hold on a second. Hold on a second.
I told me that.
But let me share something else that maybe you didn't know. is that you talk about mission, but I disagree with you.
Okay.
What you focus on is individual contribution before the mission. Yes or no? My point is there's no mission without individual contribution. One's mission can't be stronger than one's contribution to it. And you have...
Well, you said that.
No. But
As long as we get to the mission.
No, but my point, we're saying the same thing.
I got you.
That's my point, is that you've taken 60 people and made them believe they can do it because you've created an environment that accepts people for who they are.
Correct.
Yes or no?
Correct.
Okay, now,
Correct there.
Okay, no, but it's all ties together. And this is my point. We're saying the same thing, just differently. Okay? And I say this respectfully because we don't take enough time to listen that that difference is okay. What we do is we judge. I have fun with you because you said that's not what I said, but I got it. Because that's what we, and my whole point is that he just fell into the standardization trap. It's cool, and I'm having fun with you. But that's my point. It's not about...
I said that's what you said.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the same. But my whole point is that it's not about who's right or wrong or you said or I said. It's an understanding of where we all want to go.
Which is focus.
On
mission.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
No, it's beautiful.
Thank
and it's
you.
all coming full
Come on, my
circle.
man, give me some.
And I have to tell you guys, I begged for interaction among the panel because often, it's like one person says something, it's kind of boring. So I said, guys, please interact with one another. Now I'm going, wow. They're truly doing a fantastic job. So I mean that. Thank you. That's very beautiful.
No,
I still want to get so folks understand what your mission is and what you're literally doing in Detroit because it's amazing. But before we have you answer that, I want to stay on this path, okay? So we're all different. We're all trying to focus on a mission and figure out how to get from point A to point B together. We're leading that innovation. We're leading. Everyone in this room is a leader, okay? We're leading that innovation. We've got a staff member or a friend or a colleague that is not showing up optimally. And we're having conversations with them, trying to bring out the best in them, okay? How do you manage conflict from a place of love that doesn't appear to be weak? Bob, I'm handing this one to you. I can tell you're ready.
So in my book, I talk about, people used to always say to me, what would Navy Bob do? And I would look at what Jesus would do. So I want to give you an example. Just about 2 months ago, I was teaching. I'm an adjunct professor at UCF, Masters of Healthcare Administration. And as I'm teaching leadership, I see the student in the back just really frustrated. Every time I would talk, just frown. And then at the end of class, I got to the point where it was disrespectful. And I didn't get a chance to talk to the student. She ran off. So the next class, a week later, she's doing it again. So at the end of class, I said, do you mind if I talk to you about your assignment? And because I know the importance of leading with love, I asked the student, I said, are you okay? And she says to me, she says, my brother died. And I'm really having a hard time. And that was it. So leading with love, a difficult conversation, the first thing you want to do is look at yourself to see what are you doing or what struggles that person is having before you judge that person. And then once you set those clear expectations and ask that person that you care for them and they continue, just like the crew top 3, go to the crew top 3, figure out what their barriers are. And if they're doing this just because they want to do that, then you got to hold them accountable because that's not leading with love if you don't. So ask yourself first and foremost, whenever you judge somebody or you take action, before you do that, to make sure you lead with love going forward.
Thank you for that. Khali, I can imagine that there's moments that you have to have difficult conversations. You send in Jessica and Peter, or what do you do?
No, I don't. But you know what? I do tap everybody on the shoulder. Somebody may have a closer or better relationship with somebody on staff than I do, or may be more, knowledgeable about somebody. But my go-to is we do our group huddles. or our group shout outs where we shout out certain people in the room, young people, staff, or whatever. And whenever we do the group huddle with the kids, if it's an individual who's not showing up and giving 100%, coming to work and really coming, showing up as the best version of themselves, what I do is I'll get that person, I'll have them come stand next to me, because now you have 250 kids standing in front of you, and I'll just have them just look at the crowd and just look at the kids and look at them in their faces. And I'll say, you see why we here? And they'll be like, I got it. I got you. I'll show up tomorrow. Because you don't want to be responsible for letting a young person down. I've seen it happen where a young person who thought they were in the program and somehow something happened and they're not in the program, and I've seen the outcomes of that. And nobody wants to be responsible for that. And so you know why you committed to this work that we're doing. It's a work of love. It's work for humanity. It's for our community. It's for everybody. And when you get there, the last thing you want to do is show up like, not a best version of yourself, especially when you're dealing with young people. They had a lot of heartbreak in their lives. You don't want to be another person to contribute to that. And so people say, I got you. I know I got you tomorrow. They know what it's about when I bring them over there. Because sometimes I even have the staff, even if they're not having a bad day, I'll still have the staff. We'll come line up. I don't care what your position is in there. We call everybody coach. Nobody has a higher title. Everybody has the same title. We'll walk through, and some of our new people are like, what are we walking through looking at the kids for? We'll just walk through and look at every kid in the face and shake their hand. And I'll say, this is what we do this work for. Show up. And we do. So
You refocus them on the mission.
yes.
I'm hearing that theme. Glenn, you work with global executives, helping them to figure out how to have hard conversations, especially when we're going to from standardization and incorporating personalization within that standardization. Do you have a tip or two on how you help guide corporate executives to have the hard conversations?
Well, it's a very interesting question because I can give you a standardized answer.
No, I want a Glenn answer.
Well, let me take a step back, if I may. So for the past 5 years, my organization has led 7 executive summits around leadership in the age of personalization, healthcare in the age of personalization. And last October of 2023, around 1:45 in the afternoon, here, full room, facilitating this discussion. It was about chasing resilience. And as all this stuff was going on, literally I'm interviewing somebody and this is going on in my head, I said, we got a problem here. And what did I identify? I said, all we do is keep talking about the same things. It's the same story every day, the same conversation. And what I realized is that we spend so much time talking about the what, talking about the why, but we don't talk about the how. So what do? We do what we know, and that represents high risk. Look at healthcare. We've seen an industry that's gone through so much financial constraints this year like ever before. We're seeing more M&A activity in the industry. We're actually seeing more and more CEOs leave. Why? As they've told me and they've shared publicly, I didn't sign up for this. It's a different day. And I share this with you because I told myself I wasn't going to have another summit for a while. Because it wasn't about, just to give you perspective, I've prepared over 450 executives over the past 5 years, literally coaching them to deliver a message. What do I mean by that? Oftentimes I'm here with the executive and their corp comms person, and everyone's playing it safe. I go, do you realize that you're doing a disservice by trying to say the nice thing than what's real? And I wasn't trying to be rude. It's just that people want to know the truth, like what's going on. And I came to realize why that's so hard. Because we do what we know. And doing what you did 20 years ago, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, doesn't work so much anymore. Now, it may work for you, a group of people, those that think like you, but not with everybody else. And what I recognized is that it's hard to think in a world of difference because you think based on what you know. And if the majority of the people think like you, we're not really thinking, we're just agreeing with each other. No, it's true.
It is true.
No, I laughed because I said that and I wrote that in my book that I'm writing for next year.
Perfect.
It's funny that he said that because that's in my book.
Perfect.
Page 20.
But just think of what happened here. You see, something that somebody said that you said, because all these thoughts are becoming the same. What is this telling us? We are in the middle of a massive shift right now. And I shared it with you before, and I'm going to say it again. We're moving from an age of standardization to an age of personalization. Unfortunately, we're operating at the extremes because we can't find that harmony between the two. It's not that standardized ways are bad. You need standards. I'm all about standards, but we need to modernize those standards. And I realize it's even hard to do that when you don't know who you are. And this is why I wrote my recent book that just comes out tomorrow. Called Make Reinvention Your Superpower. Why is it? Because this all begins with self. It all begins with self. I'm sorry, and I say this respectfully to all you leaders that lead organizations, and I say this because we as individuals have made assumptions for a long time that, oh, my organization will figure this out. It doesn't work like that anymore. Why? Because when things change at the velocity that they do, standardization, it's all in its efficiency and it's all of its glory of trying to find predictiveness. Predictiveness is hard now. It's hard because everybody's different. Larry, every patient's different. We call in healthcare, patients are consumers. Guess what? So are employees. We are employees that have a heck of a lot more options to find another job. But we make the assumption that they'll stay. Where am I going? I realized that in order for all this to get figured out, because what we're all living is really, we're in a massive state of quicksand. We get sucked in, then someone said a few things during the week, and then we release ourselves. So we get sucked back in, and we just get sucked back in and get sucked back in. And the reason that's happening is because we haven't identified who we are, and I've identified, if I may just quickly, 6 skills to escape career quicksand. And I'm not going to go through the nitty-gritty, but just high level. Harness your natural curiosities to discover something new. When's the last time you've done that? Harness your natural curiosities to discover something new, and know that it's okay to try to find that something new in places that you've never been before. And that leads us to know we have to ground ourselves in an open, always learning mindset. We have to face the truth of what we know and what we don't know. You got to be honest with yourself, because we need to learn how to really embrace what's hard.
Which isn't that what Khali did?
Absolutely.
Isn't that what Khali did?
You've got to embrace what's hard. And that's why we love staying in our comfort zone. I mean, what would you rather do? Give me a raise of hands. Would you rather disrupt your comfort zone, or would you rather be forced to embrace discomfort? A or B? Come on, guys. This is a collaboratory. Can we be open with our... Do we want to disrupt our comfort zone, or do we want to be forced to embrace discomfort? Let's try it again. A. Excellent. B. By the way, B's not a bad thing. Okay? And the reason I share this with you...
I have one question.
The question is... I'll get there. Just let me...
Yeah.
I'm going to tee this up for you.
Tee it up for me.
I'm going to tee it up for you.
Tee it up. I'm ready.
Is it... If we all want to disrupt our comfort zone, but we don't know how. Because don't talk enough about the how. So how do you do it? You got to embrace what you know and don't know. And then once you have this always open learning mindset, which is exactly, my friend, what you have lived your entire life. You've said to yourself, I'm going to keep learning until I connect and discover my truth. That's what you did. This stuff oozes out of you. But you know what? You've had so much adversity. And you did something that was hard. That's why he's done this so successfully. But you know what the hardest thing is facing your truth that you're not relevant anymore. That wasn't supposed to be funny, but thank you.
Julie liked that one.
No, but my point is that it's not until you discover and you know, can you actually start pursuing your ambitions. What did I just describe in so few words? This is how you begin to expand yourself. You know how many times we unknowingly use our networks for the wrong reasons? You shouldn't be able to even have a network unless you've discovered, you know, and you're ready to pursue. Because otherwise, you're just asking other people to do the work that you're supposed to be doing. And that's when you start to build. You start to build for yourself and for others. And that's when you're constantly initiating motion and continuously advancing. That's where you build momentum. And you got to trust, you have to cultivate a very deep-rooted sense of who you are and your ability to elevate others. And why is that important? Because if you don't know who you are, you're in no position to lead. You're actually taking people backwards. Sound familiar?
Yeah, a little bit.
Wait, and then the final thing I teed up right now is it, once you've done this, you finally know how to lead. And now you can take this newfound knowledge and actually strengthen your purpose. And that's when you can begin to love yourself, Bob. Go for it.
He said, go for it.
I teed it up.
Man, I was ready to jab back at you, and now I'm gone. He done ducked me so long, I forgot to jab back. But what he said earlier, he said it started with self. And earlier he said you hit the societal wall, you get right back into the thing. But he said it himself, that it's in his book. He said it starts with self. And so it's kind of you said this one thing, but then you said something else again. So what I was going to say was that when we're talking about leadership. At the end of the day, we're talking about leadership, and in the work that I do, we're helping to create the leaders of tomorrow. And so with that, we remove barriers and we allow our kids to go out and explore and to come back and tell us what it is that they want to do. And we're listening. We're avatars for the kids in our community. We are proxies. We're whatever you want to call us. We in real time we go out and get what the kids want. They tell us what it is that they want to do, and we go out and try to remove as many barriers as possible. So at the end of the day, we actually work for those guys. We work for the kids in our community. They're the true CEOs of our company. And I can't say what it is like in industry, but for us, the kids are the mission, and they are the true CEOs of our company. So they come up with ideas, and we come up with creative ways to make it happen for them.
I love it.
Yes, you do.
Love that.
Yes. All right, I have to land this plane within the next 14 minutes, so that's a big culmination. And I do want to spend 5 to 10 minutes if somebody has a question that they would like to ask. I'm not always that courageous to open up to questions, but I think we've got so many leaders in this room that are doing beautifully innovative things, and I want you to be able to ask a question. But before I open that up for questions, Frank and Rob, I stalked you 5 years ago when you came to town because I said, how did Edison Awards come to Fort Myers, Florida? I'm so passionate about your work because you celebrate trying something new. And tonight's conversation was about having the courage to fail a lot because you're trying something that's new. And that's hard to do. And the fact that we live in this region and we have the Edison estates and the lab, and how many things did Thomas Edison have to try before he invented what he invented? And so I hope that, through the three of our esteemed, fabulous panelists, we all connected with, if you're here tonight, you are a disruptor, you're an innovator. And how do you have the courage to lead through innovation? And what did we hear? We heard that's from a place of love. That's within standardization. It's not about blowing the whole thing up, okay? But then getting to a place of personalization and to reshift to stay focused on the mission and on what's important, the kids that you guys are taking care of. So I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to open it up to you. Joe, would you mind? Frank has the microphone. Does anybody have a follow-up question for one of our Well, right there, Nicole, we'll start with you.
First and foremost, thank each and every one of you. This has been a really great discussion. My name is Nicole King-Smith, and I am a generational leadership. Testing 1, 2. Oh, yeah. And I do generational leadership and cultural strategist training. And one of the big topics, each of you touched on such important things: the mission, the lead with love, and the personalization. One of the big things that constantly comes up as we're leading with innovation is, how do we succession plan our next group of leaders? How do we make what we're doing attractive enough for them to be able to retain and stay within our organizations to keep fostering the leadership that each and every one of you are contributing to? And I specifically ask that because each of you have different cultural environments that you're successful in to be able to do what you're doing.
Yes, please. Thank you.
So I'll go first. And so leading with love, there are no downsides like I talk about, is that all your retention, your turnover will go down, or retention will go up, turnover will down. Those people will stay. So McKinsey had this article out in 2021 that said the Great Resignation, the Great Attraction. And they looked at 10 different countries, hundreds of thousands of people, and they said, why are you leaving your organization? And the number one reason was because they didn't feel value. So those people that felt value stayed. And those are your succession plans, because you're teaching them that they're feeling valued. And so they will stick around to be the future leaders. So you don't need a succession plan. I mean, you do, but the succession plan is going to fix itself if you lead with love. And the last thing I'd like to share with you is that one of the biggest profound things that I found by writing this book is leading with love. I told you, there are no downsides. So leading with love, you're not going to you're going to exceed all expectations. All your outcomes are going to go up. So there's no downside. So to think that you're going to lead with love, you're not going to be successful, it is just so wrong. The other thing, leading with legendary culture and building legendary. But the biggest thing that I found leading with love, and we get in a quicksand, I love that discussion. When leading with love is, you will lead a good life. What is a good life? Is a good life how much money you have in the bank? Is it the car you drive? No, when you're on this earth, as soon as you're born, that stopwatch starts. And that quicksand is causing you to not lead a good life. And so by leading with love, I want to share this one quick story real quick. So leading with love, I got to know everybody on board the submarine, and we talked about that, building authentic relationships. 4 years went by, I see this sailor, his name is Petty Officer Mankins. I go back to Pearl Harbor, I'm a Commodore in charge of 10 submarines. And I see him out running, it was 5 o'clock in the morning. I said, Petty Officer Mankins, is that you? He says, Captain Ronska, is that you? I says, how's your wife Amber? Great, mind if I stop by your office? We didn't talk for 4 years. And he comes to my office, he says, we've been trying to get pregnant for 4 years, and we can't. The only thing we want in life is to have a child. And we finally, at the Tripler Hospital, if you've ever been to Pearl Harbor or Hawaii, you see the big pink. He says, we finally got on the list. It's been 3 years, and our first appointment is in July, and we're going to get infertility treatment, and we're so excited. And he says, I was supposed to leave the island in October. That was the plan since I got here. They were to give me 4 months to have a child. And he says, I just got orders 2 weeks ago to leave in June. He goes, my wife is crying every day, and it's been 2 weeks now. I go to all my my chain of command, and no one's helping me. And he says, when I called the person placing these orders, he says, suck it up, Buttercup. He says, they're called orders for a reason. He goes, try harder, stop having people calling me. He says, you're not changing, stop having people calling me. And he's yelling at him on the phone. So I call him up. And I says, listen, you're going to change these orders by Friday. It was a Monday. I says, if you don't, I'm going to call the 4-star admiral myself. I'm going to talk about how you're treating people. And in October, he calls me up and tells me that his wife is pregnant. And then while I'm writing this book, again, this was about 6-8 months ago, he sends me a picture of his 3-year-old daughter and him. He says, you are the only reason in God that my sweet Caroline is here. The euphoric feeling I had, no submarine that I ever tracked or missile launch that I ever experienced, or carrying the nuclear codes, or being on Air Force One, even compared to the goodness of doing this good thing, that I started to cry. So people don't understand that when you're leaders, what is success? Define success. Success is about helping others. And the real thing that really sticks out to me, you all seen the movie It's a Wonderful Life. George Bailey thought he was a failure. He asked God, he says, please, I wish I would have never been born. And so they granted his wish. He sees that his brother would have died if it wasn't for him. His wife would have been an old maid. Mr. Gower would have been in jail. Pottersville would have been Bedford Falls. And at the end, his brother comes into the richest man in town, to my brother, George Bailey. So if you want to lead a good life or a wonderful life, do good things for others. And leading with love will allow you to do that. So thank you for that.
Thank you for that.
Well, so your question was, what'd you say it was?
Succession.
Succession. So currently I have an apprentice program. We have some young people who, I have one young person who came through the program as a young child, and I have another person who came on. So we're trying to see what's transferable, what lessons learned that we can pass on to other people. And we've been doing that now for a few years now. We have some really good success. These young people are turning out to be some phenomenal leaders right now in the space. And so I feel comfortable if I ever decide to retire that it'll be in good hands. And we got a bunch of kids that are in the pipeline right now who are committed to the work. We just got a text last night from one of our kids at Michigan University who was talking about coming into the same path and giving back to his community. So that's one of the things. I never want to be on stage and talk about all the bad things at all, ever. But I will tell y'all this. I will tell y'all a story on the heels of that. That is a great story, and I love it, and it inspires me right now too. I love it. One of the things that I had the opportunity, I was in a car with a young man before, and I said, another kid was coming down the street. He was smiling. He was smiling at us and stuff. He came to the van, and I said, you want to come with us to the gym? Let's go down there. You just came from that house right there. You just came from that house right there. We can go down there and talk to your parents. And the young man said, no, I'm going to come tomorrow. And I said, no, you just came out of that house right there. Let's just drive down there and go get you out this house, because I know this young man lives in the red zone. And I was speaking to somebody earlier about being in the red zone. In the red zone, when I go pick up kids in the red zone, I wear a bulletproof vest. And so I don't even send my staff there. I go there myself personally to pick up kids from over there. And I say, young man, let's go to the house. He said, no, I'm gonna come tomorrow. He had the most beautiful smile I ever want to see in my life. This kid's smile lit up the whole block. And the kid that I was picking up, he said, he's not coming tomorrow. I said, what do you mean? Why would you say something like that? He said, because they talking about killing him. And I was like, what? So I try to bag the car back, and I'm looking. I'm like, where did he go? And I'm looking, so I couldn't find the young man. And I went off, and I went to the gym, and we worked with the kids that day. And as I'm bringing the kid back home that I picked up, the streets are all blocked off with police cars and ambulance and yellow tape everywhere. And so I'm like, I can't leave this kid right here. I got to take him to his house. So I drove down the sidewalk, past the yellow tape, police going crazy. I'm like, man, get out the way. I got to take this kid to that house right there. And he saw the name on the van. He said, all right, man, let him out right here. I said, no, I got to take him to his house. So he said, pull up, come on up. And he let me pull him out at his house. And I asked what happened. And that young man died. And so for me, it's like, man, I got to keep going, because we can't afford to keep losing kids like this. We got to find places for them to go. And if anything, we need to, people always ask me, what's the hardest thing, Khali? The hardest thing is making people understand that this is important, what we're doing right now. Making people understand. People are like, oh, well, who's your favorite fighter? I mean, I don't know about boxing. None of our kids box. We got 200 kids in our program. None of them box. None of them. I just told you that we have a STEAM lab. I just told you that we have computer coding classes. I just told you that our kids are into poetry, law. They did a shadow program with the federal government. They doing these type of things. We have culinary arts classes. We have all these things. And you asking me about boxing. What are you talking about, man? We're trying to save lives. And so that's the hardest thing for me, man, is to see kids and to try to explain to rich people that this is important. We're losing kids, man. That's what's important to me. So that's it for me.
Beautiful.
So back to your question, succession and retention. Let me throw out a couple statistics for you. And this comes from a study that we recently did, our personalization study. 79% of leaders strongly believe that there is misalignment between the work environment and what matters to the individual employees. And from that group, 81% of leaders don't know how to solve this problem. Why? Oh, that's a strategy issue. No, that's an HR issue. No, that's a diversity, equity, and inclusion issue. You see the point? We just pick the box rather than really know what's really happening here. 71% of managers, and this last one, and I'll get to another one. 71% of managers believe that there is unnecessary confusion in the workplace because of behavioral expectations from their leaders. This one says you got to act this way. No, this one says you got to act this way. This one said, no, these are our, corporate, what is my point? There will be no succession plan. Because if you don't know where you belong within that organization, why would you want to stay? A month ago, I got a call from Indeed. You all know Indeed? Who is Indeed? What do they do? Pardon me, David? Large recruiting firm. Haha. But did you know that they have the largest work well-being database in the world? Wow. Aha. So, they called. They wanted to be on my podcast because they wanted to share what their data said. Now, I'm always really respectful and wondered, well, why do you want to talk about that? And they said, Glenn, because we want you, now you guys got to know me a little bit, we know that you're going to ask us the hard questions. So I asked them this question. What percentage of organizations, and particularly in healthcare, what percentage of organizations in healthcare know how to solve for work well-being? What are you saying? None?
I'm saying that percentage is single digit probably.
Well, he's with Indeed, and he was trying to be he goes, Glenn, it is clearly less than 50%. And he goes, why? And he goes, Glenn, because people, first of all, they don't have the resources for things like this. But the leaders continue to lead the way they've always led. And we don't know how to connect with the human being. I share this. Why? Because what were the three biggest reasons why there's poor work well-being? Henceforth, why it'll be difficult to retain, let alone create a succession plan. Number one, the work environment, right? This has been a theme tonight. The work environment doesn't make me feel like I belong. Number two, I'll tell you number three first, because then I'll tie it all together. Number three, and because of that, I don't feel included in my work. I don't feel like I'm included. And as a consequence, number two, I don't have the energy to bring my best performance to work. How could you? In fact, I shared this with Jesse, and I know it may sound crazy, but I actually believe that more and more people are going to get chronic disease states and die within the next 5 years. We're just not made to endure that level of pressure. But what's the point? if you don't create an environment to even begin having those conversations, why are we even talking about succession? You see the point? We talk about the standardized things, not the personalized things. And you need both to succeed. It's not one or the other. You need both. And who would have thought that I was going to give you an answer about succession and retention by talking about environments and what they do to people and what matters to an individual so they can bring their best performance to work. See the connection? Yes or no? Okay, tell me, can you get the mic to her, please? Because here's the big question. No. You know why? Because it doesn't matter what I said. It matters how you interpreted it. What'd you get out of the message?
Basically, what I got out of your message is it really is because of personalization and technology innovation, people are now in the mindset that I can have what I need, what I want in all one place or one space. And if I don't feel valued because I value time over money, it's one of those things where I know time is a bigger asset than money. And if I'm going to show up, I have to, like you said, be seen, heard, and valued. And if I'm not going to do that, then I'm just going to do just enough to get by until I can transition to where I need to be.
First of all, good for you. And notice she said it her way. If she would have said it my way, I would have been disappointed because you would have fallen into the standardization trap. But think about that. Think of how many people are on a succession plan. Don't you feel sometimes that regardless of what your standing is, what your expertise is, the relationships that you have and everything that comes with it, it could be gone in a flash?
Yes.
Maybe we're beginning to understand. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Nicole, thank you for your question, and I apologize that we only had one question, but I thought that was a delicious dive. Here's the great news. Our beautiful panelists are available for the next hour in the lobby to have follow-on conversations. You can share stories with them. You can ask them questions. We have 2 books. Well, I don't know, Bob, you brought one book, Leading with Love?
Yeah.
Bob recently also published a second book that's coming out in the near future in the healthcare space. Glen's book is coming out tomorrow, but I think he's got some copies with him. So, and Khali, you're going to be able to be with your team, Peter and Jessica, to also dive deeper into the work that they're doing in Detroit. So please join us in the lobby, but let's all thank ourselves for driving through this traffic and coming here to have this conversation.